And no wonder. It seems to many Americans that lately, the government no longer works for the people. Congress lurches between total gridlock and self-imposed crisis, and our leaders seem more interested in political posturing than the good of the country. Consider the 2011 debt ceiling crisis as a case in point. The crisis was entirely self-imposed, and while no one actually wanted to let the nation default on its debt, no leader seemed willing to take the actions necessary to prevent it. It produced a lot of sound and fury, but no real resolution. Lawmakers just kicked the can down the road. The incident did, however, manage to cause such alarm that our credit rating was downgraded for the first time in history, and it kept lawmakers from accomplishing anything else for months. And sadly, this is becoming a habit. Since 2011, we've also had the fiscal cliff, sequestration, and most recently, the government shutdown. Worst of all, many citizens don't feel we have any power to break this cycle. So how do we get American politics back on track? To address this problem, we'll all need to take responsibility and start behaving differently, from lawmakers to citizens, from our leaders to ourselves. We need to choose a strategy that addresses the root cause of this problem. But we also need to consider the drawbacks of any strategy to make sure we can live with its consequences. Each of the following options sees the root cause of the problem differently and draws ideas from across the political spectrum to address it. These options were developed not by any political party or expert, but by talking to citizens throughout the country. This framework was developed by citizens for citizens to use as a starting point in deliberating about how to respond. Our political system is not going to fix itself. It's up to citizens like us to change how politics gets done. So, what are our options? If we believe the real problem with politics today is lobbyists and big money, then our strategy should be to break the grip of special interests through actions like restricting lobbyists and limiting corporate campaign contributions. But one person's special interest is another person's important cause. The main drawback of this option would be giving up some opportunities to pressure our lawmakers and advocate for our interests. It could even be called a violation of people or corporations' right to free speech. So, for instance, what if we required full disclosure about all meetings between lobbyists and lawmakers or their staff? This would increase transparency, but it also means we'd have to record and make public an enormous amount of meetings, even trivial ones. And if private meetings became public, would frank discussion even happen? We could also amend the Constitution to reverse the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United, which allowed unlimited corporate campaign contributions. But this would restrict free speech to corporations. Or, what if we require media outlets to provide free advertising to political candidates? If we also require that politicians could only use those outlets, this would level the campaign cash playing field. But it would also limit candidates' free speech. It would also eliminate a large source of revenue for media organizations. If we feel that the real problem is that our political leaders are not accountable to us, then we could try to make them more honest, transparent, and responsive by creating rules to increase responsibility, things like term limits and making it easier for ordinary people to run for office. But the drawback of this is that more noble, public-spirited officials might actually be less effective within our current system. So, what if we could introduce term limits in Congress? That would prevent an entrenched political elite, but it would also reduce the benefits of experience that many senior lawmakers have. It would also require amending the Constitution. We as citizens would also have to take more responsibility for paying attention to our lawmakers' financial dealings and votes. But if we all did that, it could very well lead to more instances of gotcha politics. What if more citizens from outside the established political system stepped up and ran for office? They would know better what their communities need, but they might not know how things work in Washington. If we believe the problem with our political system is the system itself, then we need to fix the mechanisms of government so that they produce efficiency, fairness, and responsiveness. But the drawback of this strategy would be that we'd be making changes we wouldn't know the long-term effect of, possibly creating new problems. So, for instance, What if we eliminate gerrymandering and put independent citizens committees in charge of drawing electoral districts, rather than the politicians themselves? But more evenly drawn districts would undermine the power of minorities, which often depend on majority-minority districts for their representation. What if we allowed people to vote on weekends, or made Election Day a national holiday with same-day registration? This would make it easier for more people to vote, but the drawback is that it would increase the number of less informed voters, canceling out some of the votes of the well-informed. We could also revise the rules for filibustering in Congress. This would prevent a few lawmakers from blocking actions supported by the majority, but that also means it would be easier for the majority to pass anything they wanted. These three options are the starting point for our conversation. Each has real disadvantages, but in order to make progress, a broad range of people will need to act together, which means we need to weigh the trade-offs against what we hold valuable and make a decision everyone can live with. This isn't just a polite discussion, it's work, the difficult, messy work of citizenship. So, let's get talking.